Association of Government Accountants for this opportunity to give you our perspective from the Office of Finance and Budget in the legislature on just the current state of the government's financial condition. About a couple of years ago, Zenny Nace, one of your active members, invited me to speak before the cohort class at the University of Guam for the Association of Certified Financial Managers. And she wanted me to just talk a little bit about government and the program. And for me, at that time, I said that I was so happy to be among a group of motivated individuals who want to upgrade their skills. But I saw it as a good news and bad news for the legislature. The good news is that with the training that all of these government financial professionals are receiving and their efforts to get their certification in government financial management, the good news is that when they tell us we have a $346 million deficit and we cannot spend any more money, we know they are correct. The bad news is that when they tell us that we have a $340 million deficit and the legislature should not appropriate any more money, we know they're correct. So that, ladies and gentlemen, to me, is really the crux of where are we in our government finances. Do we listen to the politicians, or do we listen to the individuals that work day to day with the financial conditions of this government? For me, with the process that has been put in place by the legislature, I believe that we have mixed the two ingredients together: the financial managers of the government of Guam and the political managers of the policy that govern the financial condition of the government of Guam. And we've mixed these two elements together in the current process that we have when we decide how much money we're going to have, what should we spend it on, and where is it going to come from. And this has dovetailed in this foundation of what is it that operates and works with our government, and of course that is the annual budget act of the government of Guam. And the two elements come together. The annual foundation for the government operations, of course, in its annual budget. The process involves, of course, the governor, where he sets his spending plan, sends it down to the legislature, and then the legislature accepts or modifies the plan, which then becomes the fiscal year guide for the government operations. So the annual budget is a planning document. When approved, it becomes the annual operating plan for the government of Guam, and it's the basis for the control of management and government of Guam funds. It outlines the legal expenditure of these funds and the revenues, and of course, the executive and legislative priority as enacted in the law when passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. The two elements that have come together under my leadership, which I have placed great emphasis on, is, of course, bringing together the politics of the government budget and, of course, the policy and the professional management within the government of Guam. And these were put together in an act that is contained in Chapter 13, Title 2, which, number one, established the Office of Finance and Budget, and two, also established what we have in terms of the Special Accounting Service Group and the Special Economic Service Group. So these two groups consist of government professionals, both from the professional management level and some of the professional policy level in terms of the governor's directors that are appointed to the financial arms of this government, namely Department of Administration, Rev and Tax, and BVMR, who are represented in these two. The revenues today adopted in the 2011 budget total $546 million. The policy that has come into play with regards to how do we handle the revenues we collect is also contained in Section 22-436, Chapter 22, Title 5, which sets aside the deficit reduction component of all annual budgets for the future and the appropriation cap limitations on the budget and the revenues that we identified. And that sets aside 2% of the annual collections of the government of its operating budget for deficit reduction. So from the $546 million, 2% approximately totals $10 million set aside for revenue deficit reduction in every single budget that we've passed. Now, as of the 12/31/10 report, the end of the first quarter of fiscal year 2011, the actual revenues that we are seeing and have been reported are below by about $541,720, or about 0.44 variance from the projected revenues of the government of Guam. So that's the actual shortfall when you compare it against the appropriated revenues for operation for the first fiscal year, for the first quarter of the fiscal year, versus what we actually collected and are slated to fund that. And that includes the 2% set aside for deficit reduction. So it is not net of that 2%. It actually is inclusive of the 2% reduction. It means that we now have in reserve, supposed to be from actual cash collections, about $2.4 million for government operations of deficit reduction. And when we look at the revenue trends in the government of Guam at this time, they continue to look very positive, with tourism continuing to show significant growth in the upcoming fiscal year. And so where are we at with regards to expenditures? The FY 2011 appropriations to agencies are based on the FY 2010 expenditures. We needed to do this. In the FY 2010 budget, we actually set appropriation and expenditure levels of about approximately $570 million. But we saw, as we progressed through the years, that we were short of that, and DBMR and our office worked together to try and control the expenditure level of the government of Guam to reflect the reduction in the cash collections of the government. And so during that fiscal year 2010, even though we missed our projections with regards to the revenue, we adjusted the expenditure level so that we were able to manage it from a cash perspective. And so the the cost structure in this fiscal year is really very, very close to the cost structure and the appropriation levels in FY 2010.